Augmented reality is here and it's going mainstream, so why don't you know about it already? In his 1992 science fiction novel Snow Crash, Neal Stephenson coined the term metaverse, a place where humans as avatars interact with each other and software agents in a 3D virtual space that uses the metaphor of the real world. Stevenson used the term to describe a virtual reality-based successor to the internet. In July of this year, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg told his employees about an ambitious new initiative that would shift the company's business model toward a maximalist, interconnected set of experiences straight out of sci-fi, a world known as the metaverse. Just about that same time, I received an email from a bright, ambitious young entrepreneur from London, Ontario named Ben Switzer. Ben is a disruption architect whose focus is to bring forth the next generation of tourism placemaking and visitor engagement technology. XR Studios' focus is a user-friendly platform that creates augmented reality for tourism destinations. Imagine, if you will, walking down Bay Street in Toronto with your mobile device or your VR glasses as the architecture and its significance is highlighted for you. You could say that's the world Ben Switzer lives in, but more appropriately, it's the world that he helps to create for tourism destinations around the world. Hello, Ben Switzer. How are you? Where are you? What's it like?
Hi, good to be here. It's a beautiful day. I have a great view, and I'm just watching squirrels jump from tree to tree. Very relaxing. I'm feeling fantastic. Usually around Tuesday is when I'm at the height of my motivation. Monday is always really exciting, and Tuesday's getting into it. So I'm really happy to be having this discussion to close off the day.
Where are you based now?
We're based out of London, Ontario. We have our offices in Wortley Village.
London, who was it? Buckminster Fuller commented on London as a test market. Too close to Toronto to fly, too far from Detroit to drive. Made it a perfectly isolated market.
I mean, it certainly does feel like a test bed a lot of the times, and it certainly has been that for us as we've been experimenting over the last couple of years with technology. And I have to say, I'm grateful to London. It kind of is that mid-sized city where you can be a big fish in a small pond here, and you can feel like a small fish in a big pond as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, I want to get right into sort of the headline in this one. AR's here. It is mainstream. It's everywhere. Most people don't know about it. But first, I want to talk a little bit, just a little bit, if you don't mind, about your story. You're a very young entrepreneur. You're very engaging from the moment someone meets you. You told me a story, a little bit about your own story, and I hope you're willing to share it, which is you got here because of a traumatic brain injury that caused you to replumb and rethink. And I want to understand that process. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing the story. I started this entrepreneurial journey kind of before I knew it that I was on the path, and I think that's the case for a lot of people who experience a problem firsthand, and then they feel compelled to solve it for themselves, and then they learn something about what value means to a group of other people who they may share that similar problem with. And for me, I was 19 years old, and I was afflicted with Lyme disease from a tick bite. I was actually up camping in Tobermory, which is one of my favorite places in Ontario, just playing frisbee golf in some long grass. This was before all the signs were up and there was more awareness about this. And in fact, it was a little politicized at the time whether or not someone could have Lyme disease. So I went without a diagnosis for quite some time, and the disease progressed over about 8 years, and I did eventually receive treatment. I was cured. I was very fortunate
Wow.
to have access to that level of care. I definitely take stock of my privilege. That was kind of an inflection point in my life where if I hadn't had the support that I did, things may have not been possible for me to be here.
That influenced you in your choice of what you're doing now, though. How?
Well, after I was treated for Lyme disease, I still had a brain injury as a result of the infection, and it was a crippling uh, injury. And I became very motivated to learn about the brain. So I studied neuroscience and psychology. I was voracious, learning about it day and night. I was super interested in artificial intelligence and systems thinking and these kind of big ideas. And that kind of brought everything together for me. And I kind of had this revelation of I could apply this knowledge from neurorehabilitation and this cognitive enhancement stuff that was just coming out, very cutting edge, to myself, and I could have success. And so I went for it. I became patient zero, so to speak, for this program that I designed, and I trained hardcore, like 4 or 5 hours a day for a year, to rehabilitate my brain, just like doing physio from a car crash.
You could have gone on and done all sorts of things with that learning, but you decided in some sense to democratize tourism and to work specifically in the tourism field, which is what we're here to talk about today. And what I admire about what you've done is you've made it really accessible. Sometimes, in tourism, when we hear augmented reality, virtual reality, our numbers start to roll over in our head with 6 and 7 figures. And how do you get started? But let's go to that first question we asked at the opening here. Augmented reality is here, isn't it? So it's all around us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of people experience AR and they don't know that it's happening. I mean, the most popular version of AR people are familiar with is Pokemon Go, but Instagram filters, even the environmental ones that make you look pretty, that is AR in a sense. Because what we're doing,
please continue.
What we're doing is we're modifying the world with information, and the way that we perceive the world with information in real time. It's one of the simplest ways to think of it. There's definitely a visual component to AR in most cases, but this is actually a discussion we are having at the company because we're doing some experiments around accessibility, and we asked to ask the question, what's augmented reality for a blind person? And it comes down to we're enriching the experience of the world around you with information.
When you say it that way, I'm cognizant why we don't know it's all around. So AR exists in two forms: the very visible, hey, put on the halo glasses and away we go and immerse yourself. But it also, in a perfect working sense, is invisible when it works well too. Like you say, it's a series of cues or things that help us navigate through life and through the world.
Yeah, I guess you could think of it that that's the high level philosophy that makes the most sense for you to understand what it feels like to experience good, like user experience design in augmented reality. Because, for instance, if you're in our app, you're not constantly in AR holding your phone up, looking at virtual objects, because that's not comfortable to do for like hours at a time. So there's periods where you're bringing your phone down because we also want people to be immersed in the actual environment and be connected to that sense of place.
Okay, so we've talked theory on this, and I'm dying to hear this. Let's have a couple examples, and you have a range of examples of stuff from sort of what I call pristine archives, and maybe you can talk about the Joshua Tree experience. But first, there's a phone-based example. Sir Frederick Banting House. Tell us about that. Tell us, remind us who Banting is and why he's important, and then tell us about the project. And then I want you to really frame it for us as tourism executives as to how accessible what this was, how it was done. It didn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So walk us through that example, if you would.
Yeah, so this is a really special project because it brought together all of these different elements in terms of community organizations and different perspectives in terms of who's going to be this beneficiary of this experience and how do we construct it so there is a tourism impact. And in London, we actually were funded by Tourism London to build the technology. And so we've now been launching stories with all kinds of different partners. In this particular case, we were working with Old East Village, business improvement area here in London, as well as Digital Main Street and Communitech, Tech Alliance, and then the Banting House National Historic Site. For those of you that don't know, Dr. Banting, he was the pioneer who discovered insulin for diabetes. He was a prolific polymath. He invented many things. He was a painter, and apparently he discovered insulin by mistake. He was lecturing for a colleague, and then it was through the process of preparing for the lecture that he had this realization about insulin. Very cool story, very interesting historical figure, one of those cases too where in London you could walk by this place 100 times and not know that it's there to a certain extent, and that's kind of part and parcel to um, the benefit of what this technology can do for stories that have been around for a while, but you're experiencing them in a whole new way that's exciting and cool. Um, and it was especially important during COVID because they couldn't sell tickets, they couldn't have visitors inside of the location. So we went in and we reproduced the famed bedroom in a 3D scene outside. So through the lens of your phone, you can walk through this portal, and the whole room appears all around you. There's Dr. Banting as a statue, reading from his archival journals about his eureka moments. It's very immersive. And what I love about that particular scene that we made was you can go up with your phone to all these little details inside the room, like the little clock on his table, a little picture of his family. You can go around, see the back of the picture, because it's 3D and it's a big space. Like you're walking around all inside of it. If you feel that immersive effect, that's like you're inside of a movie that's happening around you.
So feedback on that. How did people like it?
People love the Banting experience. It was especially well received by young people, and so much so that the school board here in London has integrated into the curriculum. So if you can now put the Banting experience in your lesson plans and make field trips to this location.
Wow. Okay, so Tourism London's involved, a progressive destination management organization. What do they do to? I mean, obviously they helped get this started, but how did they leverage it to drive visitation in some sense?
Yeah, there was really a need, especially early on during COVID, to create experiences that were located outside that could draw people in who are a local audience. And that was this really interesting thing of now we have to market to tourists in our own backyard, as well as cultivate, international markets and national markets, get people from other cities and things like that. But we wanted to really tap into that local steam that we actually have here. And that meant we needed to have safe experiences that didn't require you to touch people. You could do it distanced. You could do it outside. And so all of those kind of constraints came together and gave us this technology. So we kind of built it from the inside out, from all those requirements, with the idea in mind, like eventually this is going to open back up, and then we can bring people together and gather them around the experiences. But for now, it's more like one at a time, please.
So hang on, augmented reality is here. It's going mainstream and it's COVID safe. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it had to be, and it was the perfect timing for us to explore the technology for this industry.
So fantastic opportunity. The reemergence of the local market first in the pandemic makes perfect sense. Did you get a social media following around the experience?
We had really good engagement to the experiences, and we were able to achieve a lot of success in media, with the press, all of this. The stories that spawned from the stories were really interesting, like how people experience them. And there's one actually that I really love called the Octopus Garden. It's on Dundas Place, which is one of our other partners in the downtown London business improvement area. We took this huge under the sea mural, and we wanted to bring it to life. And it's always the case that we try to find the artist that's associated with this public art. And unfortunately, Stephen Watson, the artist, had passed away. So we collaborated with his family to tell his life story and the inspiration for the art through the piece. And that became a popular experience, I think partly because it was, again, this thing people walk by all the time, but they didn't know that there was this sad, beautiful story connected to like ocean conservation and cancer and all of these themes that we care about, but you wouldn't see from the surface that it's right there, just hiding right underneath.
So those are two experiences in London. Have you built more in London?
Yeah, we have. We've got a Halloween experience by the courthouse. London's got quite a history of criminals from our past. One of them is actually a one-legged fugitive who had a peg leg, who shot a police officer, fled, and there was a national manhunt, and I shouldn't laugh, but I guess it's
Shouldn't
long
laugh.
enough ago that I find it a little funny that there was this national manhunt and apparently like 20 people with peg legs got arrested
Oh my
because
gosh.
they're
Oh
all
my
looking for
gosh.
this guy. So in the experience, this like skeleton pops up and kind of scares you. And if you look down, you can see he's got a wooden leg, and it's like telling the
So
story of
if I'm in London, how do I know that these events are on? Is it app based? Is it simply web based?
it's all in the app, and then we run campaigns.
Right.
So each experience comes with a campaign, and then we engage all of the different community organizations involved, social media, press, PR, all that stuff.
So hang on, you actually take a role in stakeholder engagement that I'm going to use the word as a pun, augments the DMO's connection to its local businesses, merchants, and interest groups.
Yeah, that's the idea with a particular emphasis on arts and culture. So we want to bring
Fantastic.
those up in order to have an authentic story. Like I often use tapestry as this idea of like all of these threads are woven together, and we want that to be we want there to be consistency and authenticity in the stories, and we have to work with the local community to do that. It makes
Mhm.
the process take a little longer, but the product is so much higher quality that we can't do it any other way.
So even in those cases you've given us examples of, the thing that shocked me when I went to look at some of your pricing on this, it's not prohibitively expensive. You're talking about the Banting experience. It's immersive. It would take many, many months to build it, but the price tag on it was reasonable. The aquarium one, similarly so. What can you tell us as tourism professionals about engaging and getting started in this? Because I think one of the biggest concerns is the minute we talk, VR or AR, everybody worries that, someone's going to back up a transport truck and roll out $500,000 worth of gear. Talk about the process. I mean, we're literally talking to tourism professionals. We want them to engage in augmented reality. How do we get them over those hurdles? What does it look like? I'm not going to ask you specifically what it costs, but give us some framework to that.
Sure. Yeah. So our pricing basically has three tiers. The first tier is all around audio tours, and we actually created this. This was part of the challenge from Digital Main Street, was to create a super scalable.
Sorry, and just for our friends in the US, Digital Main Street is a business improvement area initiative in the province of Ontario that has allocated a significant chunk of funding for improving the digital presence of individual businesses across the province. And it's been very, very successful. Keep going back.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing program. That thousands and thousands of businesses have had digital transformation services. I just wanted to do a little plug for DMS there. Yeah, so part of our challenge with DMS, because we were actually in a special project called DMS Labs, where technology startups would come in and propose a bold idea, and then there's a back and forth between Communitech, the Regional Innovation Center, Tech Alliance, and other innovation partners. And we kind of came to the solution of, okay, so we created the Banting experience. Now that Banting experience cost about $40,000 to create. It is one of the highest quality types of experiences that is really possible. So we're talking about a huge exhibition space.
We're also talking about literally a virtual museum that will be there as a legacy value asset forever.
Yeah, and that's one of the ROI points that's really important to mention is it's a capital investment for long-term returns, essentially. Just like you're gonna a lot of placemaking, you're looking at fundamental infrastructure and things like that. You have to make those judgment calls as you're going through it, and we see the value and the long-term potential of this, especially as the millennials and Gen Z are coming up, and they're the next generation of tourists. They need a digital layer for their experiences. It's not even they want it, like they need it.
That is such a prescient thing to say. It's not just they want it; they need it. It is unengaging. Otherwise, they are so used to having that reference point, right?
Exactly. I mean, they're steeped in it from since iPads when you're like 3 years old, all the way now that they come to expect it, and they won't engage if there's a single like speed bump in the user experience journey. The drop off rate is higher than ever for that type of user experience. But going back, I want to stay a little bit focused on your question. So we created this product for audio tours, which is all around creating custom guided tours all around the area with all these stops. Each stop has like audio information, so we're able to turn any space into like a walking museum, basically. I can share I'm excited about an upcoming project with the Ontario Black History Society that's going to be launching in Toronto. We've got another one launching, interestingly enough, also about Black history in Harlem coming up in the next few months. That's a really flexible and affordable tool. The great thing is it's like you can turn on that history tour and then shut it off and turn on now a pop-up tasting with like vendors, or you can do like a pub crawl. And we made it super fast, like a dashboard that you log into to create your own tours.
So your audio tours are actually geo-specific now.
Exactly. So it's geolocated content for all different manner of use cases. And that's actually one of the things we did in Toronto for Luminosity Festival. And maybe I could talk about that in a minute. But okay, so audio tours, really great product for every type of BIA and tourism organization. Anyone can afford it. That's the cool thing about it. And it can be deployed from anywhere to anywhere. So that was a really great achievement we had through DMS. Then what we do is we take augmented reality, which is very custom produced, facilitated storytelling through community engagement, very strategic too, because we're choosing a location, a site, like, all right, we're going to make this site activated, and we're going to do it in such a way that's going to draw visitors long term. That's the goal, right? So we're trying to align with the strategy of the DMO. Now that cost is around 35,000, up to the highest cost. Like the biggest project we've done was around 650,000 to do multiple cities activated over a period of years. And so London, St. Thomas, and Port Stanley are all going to be activated by the summer with augmented reality adventures.
So what does that look like with 3 cities, augmented reality adventures?
So it's like you've got a mix of these exhibits or attractions that are throughout the city in these key locations that we want to drive foot traffic to in all of those towns and cities. And so you can really kind of drive around the region, and there's always something nearby for you to see. St. Thomas, if you ever get a chance, is really cool. It's one of the highest quality experiences we've ever done. It was done with the Elgin County Museum. There's this one where it's like a train comes like flying right beside you. It sticks right on the tracks, and it feels like you're there. We built it from this model replica. It's super accurate. It was really cool. But that kind of gives you a sense.
Is that a youth-focused experience, or is it a?
It was, yeah.
It's not the one with the elephant, is it?
It is the one with the elephant. Yeah. So if anyone knows about St. Thomas, they love trains and elephants. They have this big jumbo elephant. So we did kind of like, pardon me?
I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go into the story of Jumbo, but no. I will say that St. Thomas is a railway city and has been for a long time, so they hold on to that heritage. They've also done a tremendous amount of community development over the past couple of years. It is like unbelievable. If you've ever been to St. Thomas and you haven't been for a while, come back and check it out, and you'll be surprised at all of the work that they have done. And the AR is just one component of that. That's like taking all this placemaking stuff that they were doing, which is so cool, and adding another layer of intensification to it.
Can I ask you this? With the success of the London projects and building out St. Thomas, and where's the other one? Port Stanley? Where did you say? Port Stanley. Is the actual experience that you're building started to build its own following of people who just can't get enough of this stuff, or what?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have what we call super users. So our analytics system, we can actually watch individual users. There are these little leaves. We don't know who they are because we protect people's privacy. But these little leaves of our logo just kind of like scribble along the map, and you can watch them go in real time. There are definitely super users that run around checking out all the different adventures, and sometimes going into the same one repeatedly to find all the little details that you might not notice the first time around. Like one of the things that distinguishes our experiences is that people spend 4 to 5 times longer inside of those experiences than the industry standard for augmented reality, which is usually like, boom, I just got an advertisement coming at me in 3D. Okay, 30 seconds. Great. Right. I'm going to buy Sapporo or whatever the case may be.
Right.
We wanted people to go into that scene and get sucked in. And then when their experience is done, They're standing still, metaphorically speaking. They're engaged, they're motivated, they're happy, and they're ready to take an action.
So in your interface, and it really is an interface that you're perfecting and a way of interacting, as you pointed out, it's not the same for all people. Different abilities and different skills and different limitations define what's augmented reality for certain groups. But we're just beginning to scratch the surface of the content, aren't we? I mean, right now we're telling stories that are extant, but you could live in a story that was unfolding. Have you written an interactive live theme game sort of scenario yet?
We've been passing around ideas. I mean, the future of storytelling is maybe another discussion we could have. And I have a sci-fi background, so this is super interesting to me. The hero's journey and the different permutations of story, I think, could be modularized to a certain extent. I think AI may have a role to play in the way that we tell stories in the future. AI has been writing articles and things like that. Procedurally generated games are very common. So we've certainly played around with ideas, and we always try to make our experiences interactive in one way or another. And we're now just mastering really a good multiplayer. So that I know is going to be a hugely positive experience now that people can start to gather again.
Wow. So I hadn't thought about it. You're actually looking at multi-person simulations where you're simultaneously aware of the people who are in it with you. And they can literally be proximate to you right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. All right. As we go into this, we could talk forever about storytelling or the technology. As I said at the beginning, you developed a model specifically for tourism. You're very good and sensitive to the idea of what destination organizations do. And I know you've worked with London and a number of other organizations. To get started in this, to look at your destination, whether you're Baton Rouge or you're Barcelona, what does it start with? It starts, rather than the idea we want to be virtual, it starts with a great opportunity to tell a great story, doesn't it? I mean, I can imagine Parc Güell, the Gaudi Park in Barcelona, being an incredibly immersive. I mean, every time you turn your head in that place, it's like a flashbulb, right? How do we get started as destinations?
It's a great question. I mean, to a certain extent, it starts with a story, but it also just starts with a will to innovate and to take risks. I think that when times are turbulent and there's chaos, it's easy to form a protective sort of mindset. Um, but these are the times to invest. I think that you need to have a bold strategy in order to be willing to take those risks. So that's kind of like an internal change management thing. The second piece is what's the strategic goal? So clearly identifying, okay, we want visitors. Where do we want visitors? And from location, we get story. So we always start with a strategic conversation, asking what's the metric of success? You want visitors? You want heads and beds? Okay, well, that's going to give us 3 locations, 3 pilot locations. And then we
Mhm.
begin to define the terms of the story and also the scope of the budget, who are the partners, and then we build the collaboration locally to make that happen.
So it's interesting because there's a double-edged sword in that overview, and it's this: if COVID hadn't happened, I'm going to bet you wouldn't be nearly as far along with this. I mean,
Yeah.
London Tourism, was it Cheryl Hicks of London?
Yes, that's right.
So the necessity to pivot and serve local and do it in a non-contact way has probably accelerated your business, which is kind of cool. Um, what I'm hoping for is in recovery is all of these new skills we've learned as destination organizations, as tourism stakeholders, as visitors, that some of them stick with us. One that's not going away is we are all so much more comfortable with our devices now.
Yeah.
I mean, the Zoom call used to be the exception. Now we're all pretty good at it. We're dressed from the waist up, looking great. Always on. I think in some sense, the adoption curve for new technology and tourism is there. We're not going back to the old models of marketing. We still have key accounts in, travel inspiration markets far away, but what we're doing on the ground in our markets is much more significantly local and engaged. So I think this kind of technology even though it takes, you're saying it takes some guts to do it, I think we're all there. We're all on the edge of doing it. And
Yeah.
as long as we can find easy ways to get on that highway, then we can do it. And that's where I really got excited when you first contacted me and you talked about XR. My thoughts were, I get these calls all the time from studios who want to do things, and it turns out they're mega studios. I think, and I'm not trying to plug your business here, but if somebody wants to have a conversation with Ben Switzer about how to do, VR, get started, I think you'll find it pleasantly engaging in the fact that it fits well inside your current models and the budgets aren't bad. So I'm not plugging your business, but I am saying find your Ben Switzer in your market and talk to them, because this is, as we said, here, it's going mainstream, and you only don't know about it because you haven't been looking.
Absolutely. And I mean, we live in a time of exponential acceleration of technology. And when a disruption like this comes in, it can get very, the effect size becomes very large very quickly as it doubles. And just looking at our research and development in our company, the quality of the experience, the immersiveness, the interactivity has increased dramatically, while our speed has increased. So while the quality is going up, the speed's going up, and we're going to see that become democratized as well. And it becomes now easier for us to scale content very rapidly than across a larger region, which is why we're looking, we're now expanding into Europe and into the US because we can do that remotely.
It's really a pleasure to talk to you. I very much enjoy what you're doing and your thinking. Thanks for being here. We'll check back in a few months, and I'm sure you have some great stories to tell us.
It's always wonderful chatting with you, David. I'm looking forward to having lunch and chatting some more sometime.